The man who rescued the cold dragon hatchlings never expected them to bond like this. The frozen wasteland of Epsilon 7 wasn't meant for human habitation, but Marcus Chen had never been one to follow conventional wisdom. As a xenobiologist stationed at the remote research outpost, he'd spent 3 years studying the planet's crystalline ecosystem, completely alone except for his AI companion. That morning, the temperature had dropped to -60°C when his sensors detected unusual heat signatures near the ice caves, 2 kilometers from the base. Marcus suited up, his breath forming clouds inside his helmet as he trudged through the howling winds. The signatures were faint, barely registering, but his curiosity had always been stronger than his common sense. What he found in the cave mouth changed everything. 3 creatures lay huddled together, their scales a deep sapphire blue that seemed to absorb what little light penetrated the storm. They were no larger than house cats, with wings folded tightly against emaciated bodies. Their reptilian faces bore an almost ethereal quality, with silver eyes that flickered weakly as Marcus approached. Around them, the ice itself seemed to have been melted and refrozen in strange patterns, as if great heat had once emanated from their small forms. Dragons. The galaxy had whispered about them for centuries, an ancient species that had supposedly died out millennia ago. Yet here they were, 3 hatchlings abandoned to the merciless cold of Epsilon 7. Marcus didn't hesitate. He gathered them carefully into his insulated pack, feeling their cold bodies barely moving. They should have been warm, he realized. These creatures were supposed to be fire breathers, beings of pure thermal energy, but these hatchlings were as cold as the ice around them, their internal flames somehow extinguished. Back at the outpost, Marcus worked frantically. He set up heat lamps, prepared nutrient solutions, even tried synthetic proteins designed for reptilian metabolisms. Nothing worked. The hatchlings grew weaker by the hour, their breathing shallow, their silver eyes dimming. In desperation, Marcus did something that violated every xenobiological protocol in existence. He held them against his own body. Human body temperature was a modest 37 degrees Celsius, nothing compared to the theoretical thousands of degrees a dragon could generate. But Marcus wrapped the hatchlings in thermal blankets and pressed them against his chest, sharing his meager warmth. He sat there for hours, then days, barely sleeping, hand-feeding them water and nutrients, talking to them softly about Earth, about his childhood, about anything to keep himself awake. On the 3rd day, something miraculous happened. The smallest hatchling, the one Marcus had named Spark, began to glow. Not with fire, but with a soft, pulsing luminescence that matched the rhythm of Marcus's heartbeat. Then the 2nd hatchling, Ember, joined in. And finally, the largest blaze began to radiate gentle warmth. They weren't generating their own heat. They were synchronizing with his. Over the following weeks, Marcus discovered the truth. Dragon hatchlings, he learned from ancient databases his AI finally located, didn't ignite their internal flames alone. They needed a bond, a connection to another living being's life force. In the old days, adult dragons provided this, sharing their vast thermal energy until the hatchlings could generate their own. But these 3 had been abandoned, left to die in the cold. The bond that formed was unlike anything in xenobiological records. The hatchlings didn't just survive, they thrived. But their fire was different, cooler, more controlled, and inexplicably tied to Marcus's emotional state. When he felt joy, they blazed brighter. When he felt fear, they surrounded him protectively, their flames sharpening into shields. When he slept, they curled around him, keeping him warm in the freezing nights. Marcus had expected to study them, perhaps rehabilitate them and release them to a proper dragon sanctuary if one still existed. He never expected them to refuse to leave his side. He never expected Spark to ride on his shoulder during his daily research walks, chirping contentedly. He never expected Ember to learn to fetch his tools before he asked for them, somehow sensing his intentions. He never expected Blaze to position himself between Marcus and the door whenever the storm warnings grew severe, as if a creature barely half a meter long could protect a full-grown human. 6 months after the rescue, a galactic council ship arrived at Epsilon 7, responding to Marcus's reports about the dragon discovery. Commander Vexala, a 4-armed Tharkish diplomat, stood in Marcus's lab, her multiple eyes wide with disbelief. "This is unprecedented," she said, watching as all 3 dragons performed an elaborate aerial dance around Marcus's head, leaving trails of colored flame that spelled out "hello" in Standard Galactic. Dragons don't bond with other species. They barely tolerate each other. How did you? I just kept them warm, Marcus interrupted, smiling as Spark landed on his shoulder and nuzzled his cheek. I shared what I had. Vexala shook her head slowly. You don't understand. Dragons choose their bonds based on strength, on power, on the magnitude of fire within. You're human. You're... She paused, searching for diplomatic words. Are small, fragile. Your internal temperature is laughably low by dragon standards. Marcus looked at the three dragons, now fully grown to the size of large dogs, their scales shimmering with health, their eyes bright with intelligence and unmistakable affection. Blaze rumbled contentedly, a sound like distant thunder mixed with a cat's purr. Maybe, Marcus said quietly, they weren't looking for the biggest fire. Maybe they were just looking for someone who wouldn't let them go cold. Commander Vexala departed 3 hours later, her report to the Galactic Council full of phrases like remarkable adaptation and unprecedented interspecies bond. But Marcus wasn't thinking about galactic politics or xenobiological breakthroughs. He was watching Ember teach Spark a new trick, while Blaze dozed by the heater, one eye occasionally cracking open to check on his human. The man who rescued 3 dying dragon hatchlings from a frozen cave had expected to save their lives. He never expected them to save his in return, filling the lonely void of Epsilon 7 with warmth, companionship, and a loyalty deeper than any fire. Some bonds, Marcus learned, transcend biology, defying every scientific expectation. Sometimes all it takes is someone willing to share their warmth, no matter how small, with creatures who have known only cold, and sometimes that's enough to change the galaxy.